Better than all the rest of us. Oops. Sorry about that. It's 6 o'clock. I would like to call this meeting of the NKC Planning Commission to order. The first item of business is to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting.
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that has been approved. Our next order of business is to approve the minutes from the meeting on February 2nd, 2023. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that that has passed. Comments from the public. I would like to ask now that anyone who has public comments that are not related to items that are that'll have a public comment hearing later in this meeting. So please come to the microphone for those comments.
You want to clarify which ones we'll have public comment?
We'll have public comments, by the way, on the short-term rental amendment and on the changes to the marijuana ordinance. So anyone who has comments unrelated to those. All right, I don't see any comments. The next order of business is PC 2023-04-01, the final plat for 1401 Iron. Staff, go ahead and give your report.
Good evening, Commissioners and Chair. This item in front of you is a final plat request sent by the applicant to consolidate two pieces of land. The applicant currently purchased a 17-foot strip of abandoned railroad property located directly east of the existing building. The applicant proposed to consolidate the 17-foot strip of abandoned railroad to its current land, so therefore they can reconfiguring the site for its warehousing and outdoor parking uses. The applicant is here with us tonight if you have any questions you wish to ask.
I don't believe we have any questions.
Just real quick one. You said warehousing and parking. That was what the plans for the expanded area?
No, it's currently the site is used for warehousing and outdoor vehicle parking.
I see.
They plan on consolidate the land so they can pave over that 17-foot strip in order to reconfiguring that area.
Okay, and is that just for additional operating space? Is it for parking, or what's the?
It's for
intent?
parking.
Parking.
There is no extra building being built upon there.
We got the 1-inch situation figured out last night, right? So
Yes.
we're good there.
This building, we found out, it's been there for decades, and it's encroaching into the city's right-of-way for about 1 inch. And they enter into,
Roughly, yeah. Glad we could set that straight. You don't have to tear the building down because of it.
yep, they don't have to tear the building down.
Very
Thank you,
good.
council, for making the decision. And then, so now we can move forward with this final plat.
Perfect.
All right.
All right, is there a motion on PC 2023-04-01?
I will move to recommend approval of the final plat with conditions.
Second.
As described in the packet there.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Next item on the agenda is PC 2023-04-02. It is a final plat for 1599 Iron.
So this final plat in front of you is similar to the last case. This property is, essentially, it is known as the Iron District. It is a similar case that the property owner has recently purchased a 17-foot abandoned railroad strip of land, and they wanted to consolidate the land as well into their current land that used for our district and expand the use of those container shopping and commercial uses. Yes.
Then I'll just ask, I don't see any conditions on this. Oh, I responded. There. Good, okay.
Because there's no encroachment from the
Okay,
building
so
to the
no other
right of
conditions.
way.
Okay, on that point, then I would recommend approval of the final plat.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that is passed. The next item up for discussion is PC 2023-04-03, a zoning text amendment for short-term rentals.
All right, good evening. This item in front of you might take some time tonight. Given the merits of itself, I would like to have some description of what has happened in the past and what are we doing tonight, and then maybe discussing about what would happen in the future for the next step. So this particular item is a zoning code amendment to our existing zoning code, which is Chapter 17 under the municipal code. So the subject for this zoning code amendment is for short-term rental. Currently, I want to remind everybody that the city does not have any language in the zoning code particularly talks about this use. However, there is language in the zoning code generally saying, I'm paraphrasing it, the way we interpret it is any use that is not being described in the zoning code is prohibited unless you amend the zoning code to allow it and regulate it. So because of that, all the short-term rental, we know there are existing ones, approximately 15 to 20, depends on the time over the year. That's the average that we have been researching. They are existing illegally per our zoning code requirement. However, staff has not bring it down to enforcement because we do recognize this is something that the city wanted to have a discussion on and decide further how we want to regulate it, do we want to even allow it. And then so I believe my predecessor, Sarah Copeland, started this conversation before she left. And when I first started, by the December 6th, 2022, last year, we had a city council work session, and we had some initial gathering thoughts from city council regarding this subject. There were about 9 or 10 questions has been asked, and staff took that feedback and moved on, developed a community survey, and hosted an open house, and we had some public comments. We established a website landing page and posted all the results and the proposed text amendment language on the website as well as a public commenting area. And then so on February the 2nd this year, staff has delivered a presentation to Planning Commission as a discussion item. If you remember, we didn't have a Planning Commission last month in March, but we had one in February. So we had some discussion about this subject as well. So essentially, all the questions we asked the city council, we also asked you, and we gathered some feedback as well. And then when we took all these comments from the public and from planning commissioners and city council members, we massaged them together and had an initial draft for the proposed language over there. This is what you saw in the staff report and also in the red line version. There are essentially one big section in the proposed amendment, which is under section 17.12.040, special use standards. We propose to add a section B that for lodging short-term rental. And lodging short-term rental will be regulated with 13 different requirements over there. And I'll explain a little bit more here in a second. We also proposed a text amendment to section 17.36.0110, which is the description of uses. Given the fact that this use currently is not mentioned in the code, it's prohibited, so we're just adding a new definition of what is lodging short-term rental here. So this particular interpretation, I would like to read it, if you would allow me. So lodging short-term rental means a rental of a property, a dwelling unit, an accessory dwelling unit, or a portion thereof for a period of less than 30 consecutive days. So if you're wondering, oh, can I rent my house for 6 months? Is this a short-term rental? That's not a short-term rental. If you're renting it for a consecutive over 30 days, then this doesn't fall under the definition of short-term rental. Therefore, we do have our existing rental ordinance that we enforce. You will be put under that particular category. We're not using short-term rental regulations to regulate general rental properties. So with that being clarified, I would like to mention a couple important components in this particular section. That if you get back to see the proposed language, and for all those public who are wondering about the language, we have hard copies available by the door on the table. And if you need assistance, we have a staff here who can assist you as well. Just raise your hand. So the first item over here is for the approved space. What is approved for short-term rental spaces? So anything that can be an entire house or entire dwelling unit to a portion of it, including bedrooms, common used areas or kitchen facilities. So that's the 1A. And 1B is approved accessory dwelling unit, can also be used for short-term rental. And then the second component over here is talking about that the owner shall occupy this property on site if they're running a short-term rental, meaning doesn't mean that the owner has to leave there when their short-term rental guests are coming. It means that this particular property has to be registered under the owner-occupied particular situation. Saying, for example, if the owner is on vacation to Hawaii for a month, can they rent this house out for that particular few weeks within that vacation time? The answer is yes, because it's an owner-occupied property. It doesn't mean you guys have to sleep on the same property at the same time. And then the third item over here is for the rental unit may not be rented or offered for uses such as, reception space, party space, meeting space, or other similar events. This is to prohibit big noise and traffic, and all those are happening. And it's a very common regulation among municipalities in our area based on staff's research. And then number 4 is that food service may not be provided, and that's what we want to distinguish it from bed and breakfast. And also, there are particular commercial kitchen requirements if you are to host more guests and offering food, and there's a house department being brought into the conversation related to all those topics. And so number 5 is for advertisements that you can not put up a signage for the exterior, that to advertise this is a short-term rental property, and this is given the consideration of keeping the entity of the neighborhood characteristics of North Kansas City. Number 6 actually talks a lot, but this is a very important component. It is talking about the approval process. So essentially, if you meet all these 13 requirements, if you meet all the requirements, it is a staff approval. It's an administrative approval process. You don't have to go through any other routes. You just submit your application to community development. We review it, and we approve it, and we will inspect it, and you will be ready to go after you get business license. However, if you cannot meet all the requirements, say if you cannot be an owner-occupied property, we still wanted to create an alternative for you to say if you're a really good short-term rental property owner and you've been experienced with it, and there are certain situations you cannot meet. So we want to be able to give you a path to this alternative through a conditional use permit. So this particular language over there, I added it after I hear more community comments about this owner or non-owner occupied debate. So I believe this is a very common practice in a lot of city code, that they would allow them through some particular process that's more strict than just administrative approval. It might be lengthier, and there might be more requirements. However, it does provide a path for them to move forward. So I would like to point that out. And then number 7 is about only one short-term rental contract is permitted at a time, and one approved short-term rental application, no more than one rental registration may be permitted per dwelling unit, regardless of the building type. So what it says here is 1 per dwelling unit. Say if you're a single-family house, that is one single dwelling unit. So only one at a time. If you're a duplex, that's 2 dwelling unit. We have a definition in the code about what is a dwelling unit. So I want to make sure everybody understands that. If we're a duplex, theoretically, you can have 1 short-term rental per dwelling unit. So you can have 2 for that building. And then number 8 is about upon approval of the application, the property owner must apply and successfully obtain a city business license as required by the city's code. And so this way we can track, because staff believes short-term rental lodging facility, it is running more like a business. So we want to make sure this way we can hold the business license owner accountable and make sure it's in our system. And then number 9 is about the short-term rental license shall be valid for a period of 1 year, and then renewal will be required. So it is similar to a lot of business license requirement over here as well. And then this number 10 is about the city-issued short-term rental license for the dwelling. It should be displayed in a conspicuous place. So in case for inspection and for operation and a clarification to the customers, to your clients, so we require you place the license in the conspicuous place. And then number 11 is about that the city remains its right to deny, suspend, or revoke if we find anything that's in violation of the code. Number 12 is about all short-term rental in the city are to be charged with the hotel motel transient guest tax paid by the transient guests of hotel motels. So there are a little confusion by some of the public comments that say the Airbnb has already collected tax over there. However, there is a component to that is a city tax. Does the city charge the tax? So Airbnb no longer collects tax for the city. So it used to collect the tax for a couple of cities that signed up with the Airbnb. I don't know how far that's going to go, or in future if that's still the plan. But most of the city, in their ordinance, they will have this particular tax requirement as the city's requirement, and the city is responsible to collect it themselves. And of course, all of these are up to your debate and make recommendations, and I'll mention that a little bit more here in a second. And then so number 13, which is also the last regulation over here, is that it gives the right to the community development director, which is me, to ask for any additional documents or supplemental documents that we deem to be necessary. So all of these requirements over here, I know you might have a lot of questions, but I want to mention one last thing, that these are initial draft and recommended language from staff based off our research, public input, and comments, and dialogue, formal, informal. They're not perfect. And I wish it is perfect, but they're not perfect. But there is a big component that why staff put it the language this way, that is to make sure that it's enforceable with our current resource and capacity. And also based off of what we're hearing, and we're trying to balance the interests. However, this is just the staff's proposal to you. Of course, we recommend approval. But it's very likely that you will review these and enter into conversations and questions and discussions with your commission or peer commissioners and even staff. And after you hear public comments, you'll have more questions probably. So it's likely for you to request any modification to it. And then please understand, you are the recommending body to City Council. So staff gives you the proposal. You review it, you make recommendation. There are certain recommendations that would put it in a particular staff report. You can recommend approval. You can recommend approval with modifications. You can recommend continuance or denial. Whatever recommendation you make, so we carry that recommendation over to City Council. And City Council has the final decision making power. So they will make their final decisions. They might modify your recommendation. They might approve it as it is, and they might continue it and for more discussion. So that's generally how the process goes for a text amendment. And I know this one I'm kind of diving into the detail a little bit more because this is a subject that could be controversial, and you'll hear a lot. It's never an easy piece for a municipality to adopt a short-term rental ordinance. So anything that you enter into a lengthy conversation, I just want to make sure that you guys understand and feel like it's totally normal. And you're not going to hurt my feelings if you change anything in the proposal. All right, with that, I'm done with my presentation. I can ask any questions you have.
I now open the public hearing on PC 2023-04-03. If anyone wishes to speak, please approach the microphone.
What's your name?
I was going. There you
Oh,
go.
oh, oh, there, no.
Mayor DeLong, also council members Smith and the entire commission, thank you very much for meeting with me. First, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Sean Stokes. I'm a physician anesthesiologist, and also I've been a citizen of North Kansas City for the past 11 years with my wife and 4 kids. To preface, I don't have a short-term rental, and I don't have any conflicts of interest. In my opinion, the proposed rules for short-term rentals are restrictive, broad in scope, and not in line with the 2016 Planning Commission Master Plan, and I quote, grow and attract new and innovative business practices or opportunities. First, the way in which North Kansas City citizens' data was obtained through an open source survey where any person in the world could respond or even respond multiple times should be considered artificial and inaccurate. Through the many research trials and data gathering opportunities I've experienced in myself, an open source which allows multiple attempts and responses, such as this, would be disallowed. These data are not valid and should not be guiding our decision for future legislation. Second, the new regulations to require the owner or applicant to occupy the residence on site would all but eliminate all short-term rentals in North Kansas City. All short-term rentals that I currently see are 2 to 3 bedrooms, and they don't fit to provide a space for both the homeowner and the renter, and should not be we shouldn't have to obtain a stringent conditional use permit. I do consider a business license as well as hotel tax reasonable, but the makeup of a third tax, which is a specific licensing for short-term rentals, is inaccurate, where the business license should already be required and already is a way in which the city can regulate the short-term rentals. Although it has been popular recently for cities nearby to place restrictive guidance that suffocates the growth of short-term rentals, I think we as a city may find better alternatives. We do not need to be the same as all the other opinions of neighboring cities. Short-term rentals are known to be well kept by the owner, clean, beautifies the surrounding neighborhood, increases the property value of the area, and a great way to showcase the city in which it resides. Please do not consider unnecessarily restricting North Kansas City homeowners from providing for those that they care for by passing restrictive laws. Thank you very much.
Can you state your name?
Sure. My name is Brock Thomas. I'm not as well prepared as Sean, right? But I agree with pretty much everything he's saying. So to introduce myself, again, it's Brock Thomas. I was a 1998 graduate from North Kansas City High School. I've been coming down to North Kansas City since 1985, where I was practicing soccer on the Arrows as a little kid. One of our citizens, Chris Lip, was my soccer coach. I grew up in the old Briarcliff area, so I've always loved North Kansas City. And so about 10 years ago, I really started, I'm a real estate agent and investor. So about 10 years ago, I started really looking into North Kansas City to try to buy multifamily property. I finally came across one that was not owned by the major landlord of North Kansas City and was able to purchase 2114 Swift Street, which was a dilapidated 11-unit apartment complex, which I went and put about $600,000 into renovating that building and brought some great new tenants into North Kansas City that are spending a lot of time down in Northtown, spending lots of money, and really enjoy the place that they're living. To improve that property, I purchased 2108 Swift, which was zoned commercial at the time. It's had a number of different uses through the years, but I believe when it was originally built, it was a single-family home. It was a bakery at one point. It was an architecture firm, but it had been sitting vacant for a number of years. The reason I wanted to purchase the property was to pave the backyard, to add additional parking to the multifamily property that I purchased, which laid out a very nice parking spot. Looking for a way to create income out of the property and be able to pay the debt service and expenses of the property, I turned the property into an Airbnb. I pulled all necessary permits for the property with changing zoning, which was a big hassle with Clay County. I had to get a lawyer involved, as well as had the property inspected. I think we did some very nice work to not only the apartment building, but also that 3-unit Airbnb property. At that time, I was very forthcoming that I was turning the property into an Airbnb, but at that point, there was zero, I guess there was no zoning or special use permits that I could obtain from the city. With these requirements that have been proposed, my property would be shut down and essentially be a vacant property at this point. I've spent tens of thousands of dollars to furnish this property. I've went through challenges from management, which is very difficult inside of short-term rentals when you have scattered sites and a very management-intensive process. But we've worked out a lot of our kinks, and I think we're bringing, very good people into North Kansas City, which I think the attraction of what the city has to offer brings people to want to come down here, spend time, and visit all the amenities in North Kansas City. So I think that there need to be, I also agree that there could be some sort of a rental license. I do inspection. I do have the yearly inspections with there, and some sort of special permit or special use permit that could be used for it. But I don't think that we should put such strenuous rules around turning a property into an Airbnb. Thank you.
My name is Brenda Haney. We have an Airbnb here in North Kansas City as well. This is my grandson. Sorry if he gets noisy. We purchased our property in 2010 to move my father-in-law into, and he lived there until he passed in 2018. But our property has a garage, and so my husband would come every day to be in the garage but check on his father. And so when he passed, we did it as a rental for a while, but that is a lot of work and it's kind of messy. And so we turned it into an Airbnb, and with the Airbnb, I am there. I do the Airbnb now because I watch him. My daughter's a teacher, and she's an art teacher, and they have an art show tonight, so I still have him. But I'm there at the property 2-3 times a week. When it was a rental, I was never at the property. So I am keeping the property, I'm making sure that everything stays nice and safe. We have outdoor cameras, and I will kick people out in the middle of the night. I've done it. I am very particular. At first, when we started our Airbnb, we were pretty naive, but we've learned some things. We don't allow people who live anywhere in the city to rent our Airbnb. We are very, we make them tell us what their business is, why they're coming to Kansas City. People don't normally come here to vacation. They come passing through to another state, from the East Coast to the West Coast, vice versa. So we just make sure that they take good care of our property, we take good care of our property. We would invite any of you to come by and see what we've done. We also have a brochure in the house that says different places in the city for them to visit. So we are bringing money to the city for them, just places to go that normally you don't go, you don't know about. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Tabitha Todd. Thanks so much for having this discussion. Sorry, I just jogged here and I'm not a runner. But I was in the middle of cooking dinner and the husband got home. So I just wanted to say a couple of things. One is that I do think those with short-term rentals existing now, I am glad that the regulations do have like an alternative plan in there. No one's trying to push people out of, I think, making additional money. I think that's a great thing. On the flip side, I do just also want to say that one of my very favorite things about living in North Kansas City is my neighbors. And I think there's so much worth and charm to having a community. And I think when you have multiple properties that are just vacant, and then you have people just coming in and out, however lovely they are, they're not your neighbors. And I place so much just value in the relationships that I've built in this community. And I just would be really disheartened, I think, and it would really change my life and the lives of my children if we didn't have Savannah across the street, if we didn't have Rita 2 doors down. I mean, after school, my kids are so excited to get the dog and walk a few doors down to Rita's house so the dogs can play. Or they're so excited to have our neighbor kids over from just down the street. And I just think that's the piece that we can't put value on. And so it's not about taking away money from someone who already has a community. It's about keeping the community that we have and building it stronger. And I do also just want to point out that the regulations that are being suggested, it doesn't say there's no short-term rentals. You know, if you have a garage that you want to convert, if you have an accessory dwelling unit, if you have a basement that you want to finish, you know, you can find ways to make that work for you. But I just really, really personally would love to see the community continue to grow. And I think that with the passing of easier regulations for Airbnb, we'll see that leave. And with just a couple minutes left, I also just do want to note that I have personally talked with people in this community who have unfortunately been priced out of their long-term rentals in order to have an Airbnb move in. And we have people who do love this city and want to live here. Every home that goes up for sale still immediately has multiple offers. And people want to be a part of this community because of the community that exists and that we've built. And so I would love to see these regulations pass. Thank you.
Are there any other comments on this issue?
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Candace, and I've been a resident of North Kansas City since 2016. And I have a lot of feelings on short-term rentals. I personally have a story, and my story is that I moved to North Kansas City in 2016. I had a rental, a home, and in 2020, or right before 2020, the pandemic hit, I was in line to purchase this home. And this is the home, 1014 East 21st Avenue, so just right over along, little over community over here. So right before the pandemic hit, I was in line to purchase the home, and then, as we all know, the pandemic hit, and most of us lost our full-time income. And I now am currently working 3 jobs. I'm a teacher, I'm a yoga teacher, and I also help run this local business, kombucha tap room here called The Brookery. So I essentially, I wasn't able to purchase this home. And in 2021, the market exploded, it blew up. And when I started to gather all of my income together, the person that was selling me this home came back with a figure that was astronomical, another $115,000 over asking price. As a single woman, I'm not going to be able to do that. And so that home was sold, and sold to somebody that doesn't live here in North Kansas City, and it was flipped and turned into a Airbnb. And that has been bringing in income for that person that doesn't even live here and reside in North Kansas City. I believe that it's since been turned into a rental, but it still has, and has for the last over a year, been an Airbnb. So at the time, there were no restrictions, there were no regulations on short-term rentals and Airbnbs, and I'm all about regulations and restrictions and making sure that we have a community here, because again, I don't want to be priced out of North Kansas City, and I certainly don't want to leave North Kansas City. I'm still here in North Kansas City because I scrambled and found a little place off of 27th and Swift. So I'm between 27th and Swift and Fayette now, currently. So I appreciate you guys' time, and thank you for listening to my story.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments?
Hi, I'm here with my friend and partner. We own one Airbnb close to here. Just want to start by saying that
What is your name?
My name's Eric Washburn, sorry. I guess I just want to start by saying that we're not some huge company buying up a bunch of houses. We're two guys who cashed out the equity in both our houses in a neighborhood similar to this, Waldo, south of here, because we both had kids coming, and this seemed like a good way to help pay for both of our kids. I can fully understand not wanting to see every house in the neighborhood getting turned into Airbnb. I can understand wanting to regulate how many people can come in and do this. But what I noticed and what brought me down here is the part wanting the Airbnb owner to live in that home or not operate. That is just not feasible for either of us. We both currently own homes that our families live in. Like I said, we cashed out the equity in both our homes to purchase this home here. I feel that if we're ultimately shut down because we don't live in that building, then we're essentially we're out our own money for believing in this neighborhood. We bought here with intention. We know this neighborhood's a good neighborhood. We didn't want to, we're not here to bring, people here that are undesirable or cause trouble or anything. All our guests are heavily vetted, and they all have records on Airbnb of being good guests. They come here and spend their money in this town. So the thought of ultimately being told to pack up and leave after we've spent, tens of thousands of our hard-earned dollars to buy this house, furnish this house, really make it nicer than we found it. We bought here because we believed this was a good community. We're not trying to turn this into a hotel town, but to be told to pack up and leave and just be out your money because of that just didn't sit well with me. So again, I can totally understand wanting to limit the number that are coming in, but to tell anyone who doesn't live here to pack up and leave is just, that's what brought me here, and I wanted to express that to you guys. So appreciate your time.
Are there any other comments?
Good evening. My name is Mark Connerow. My wife and I own 4 duplexes on 28th Avenue. And we do long-term, short-term rentals, 30 days or more. So this won't necessarily impact us. But I do want to say there is a bit of a struggle, and I can relate. I was on the Planning Commission for 8 years, and I was on the council for a couple. It's really difficult figuring out how do we regulate single-family housing, and how do we do it in a positive way for the community. I'm really going to speak more about the duplexes that were purposely built with the idea that at least half of them would be rented, one side or the other. And in 2012, we purchased ours. We've since completely gutted and remodeled them. They're very nice properties. 2019, we decided to open an Airbnb. I did come down and talk to Mallory at your office, and at that time, there was no regulation. And I got to thinking, there's not a lot of regulation on rentals either. And one of the things that a provision is in here is a business license. And I find it interesting, we're going to put that on short-term rentals, but not necessarily on long-term rentals. I think I see a bit of a discrepancy there. We might want to ponder how much regulation are we going to do with the rentals in general, which will lead to an uprising of landlords, I can guarantee you. That and the hotel tax. Airbnb, to this date, has collected the short-term hotel tax from us on rental nights. There's not really a good provision currently for when you go outside of those platforms. So we may want to take a look at how do we administratively handle that. You're starting to bring in a lot of administrative burden, so if you're going to do it, kind of carry it across the board. We are owner-occupants of our Airbnb. It's right next door, so we don't have that issue either. But I can feel for somebody who's trying to operate it. It's a real challenge to keep your property maintained. You are rated by every guest you have, so you got to stay on top of your game all the time. And if you're not in it, doing the cleaning and taking care of it, your ratings are going to suffer accordingly. So those are good people. Landlords who tend to rent for long-term don't necessarily get into their properties on a regular basis. So in general, I think we've got to be careful that we're isolating short-term renters who actually come to town and enjoy it and spend a lot of money at restaurants. Often moving into the community, if we had housing available, many of them would choose to live in North Kansas City. So I just caution you as we go about this, let's think about the broader picture of rentals and the impact on not only the owners, the community around. That definitely plays a role too. There's a good way to do this. I encourage you to find it. Thank you.
Are there any other public comments? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right. Do we have an option to discuss, or do we just make a motion on?
You'll have option to discuss.
Okay. All right, let's do that. Councilmember Smith.
I have just a number of questions and discussion points. First, thanks for everybody that came out. This is probably the most public comments I've heard in a very long time. It's a hot button issue, so I understand the gravity of what we're deciding here. Shu, first question. This involves item 6 and item 8, the short-term application and then the business license. Can you talk really briefly about how those will interact? Is it somebody comes to community development, applies to run a short-term rental, approved or not? If approved, they then go get a business license, and is there a fee for both of those? How does that work?
That's correct. So for administrative approval for short-term rental registration, there's no fee.
Okay.
However, for business license, I'm not familiar with that, so I don't know exactly if there will be a fee, but my understanding is there probably is a fee for business license, just like all the other business license.
Okay. So it would be a two-step process.
Yes.
And then the piece that renews annually, is that the business license that would be renewed annually? So it's not back to the drawing board with applying again? Okay. Okay. So that's that. Let's see. The tax. So Mark mentioned that Airbnb is collecting a locality tax, and I've heard this from others around town. I have no idea where that's going. since we're not getting it and it's not part of our regulation. So maybe we find out where that money has been going, if they're sending it to Casey Mo, if they don't know better, or somebody's getting that money. And so I do favor keeping the tax. So we need to figure out what's being done right now, and if Airbnb or whatever platform you name can collect that and remit it to us. Okay, so let's go back to the top. So number 1 on here, it says approved spaces include or may include individual rooms in the principal dwelling and then the accessory dwelling unit. That doesn't really give option for a full detached home.
No, it does. So
Okay.
I know it's a little confusing. I actually had the same question asked by Commissioner Spencer, and
Yeah.
he's on, can they occupy the entire full dwelling unit, say the entire home? Yes, the answer is yes.
Okay.
You can divide it up into sections. Say you only want to rent it out a bedroom and or a kitchen
Sure.
over there, but you can rent out the full entity,
Could-
the entirety itself.
Could we hone that language to make that a little more clear, that it's not just individual rooms and kitchens and basements, and so that it's all kind of included?
Yeah, we can definitely modify it and maybe some language like it may include individual bedrooms in the principal building on the property, sharing common space, kitchen facility and living areas with the primary residence or the entirety of the property.
Or the entirety, yeah, that works. Okay. Number 4, no food service. I understand the health code aspect of this. I'm not sure how strict we're looking to be. I have had, at a point, I rented out a bedroom in my house, and we would leave a bottle of wine, or we would have some snacks available. If we're saying no food service, does that mean
You can have snacks out there, meaning no food service, typically that's the definition of you have to provide cooking
Okay.
and processing. That's why when we talk about commercial kitchen requirements,
Got
health
it.
department requirements,
Okay.
the no food service here, food service not meaning like, package the snacks over there that you're
Yeah.
offering. It's just meaning the cooking, the processing of the raw kind of food.
Yeah, and if we could clarify that a little more too, to prepared food or something along those lines. Okay, the conditional use permit exemption, which I appreciate you adding that in. The trouble I see there is that could become a lot of discretion. So you said during your talk, if somebody is good at operating a short-term rental or has proven in some sort of track record, I'm not really sure what that looks like in practice. That seems like it would be a very, it's kind of, would leave it really up to you, and that could put the city in kind of a legal crosshair if we decide.
No, a conditional use permit, let me explain this a little bit more. And my apology that I did not dive into the detail of what
Sure.
this process is like, because I do recognize a lot of you guys probably are not very familiar with what the conditional use process is. So essentially, this is an entitlement process, meaning you're not allowed to do the use by right. You have to go through some particular approval by commission, council. So this is a very standard practice, by the way, for when you want to add another layer, not allow something by right over to it. So this particular process, it has its own criteria for review. It's not going to be my preference saying yes or no. There is a set criteria in the code. What are you going to review against? You're reviewing against the impact of the traffic, noise, operating characteristics, hours, and of course, if you want to see the details of what the record is of running this or experience or other additional information you determine it is necessary, you can add that as well. But it holds the same criteria for all the cases that go to conditional use permit. And this is also a process that is because it's an entitlement process, it goes through a public hearing. So it goes to planning commission and then go to city council. And so just so you know, staff makes recommendation, like I said earlier, to planning commission. Planning commission, you make a recommendation to city council. City council finally approves it. So there will be no preference from staff whether or not we're taking some words and then make the decision. There is a set of stone criteria that we have to review against it. And typically, a conditional use permit can be revoked or suspended if they're in the violation as well.
Okay.
If that answers your question. And let me just mention a little bit more of conditional use permit is so people are aware. because it does require public hearing. So we are obligated, the city are obligated to notify property owners within 185 feet of that particular property itself, the boundary. And there's got to be a public notice putting up on the particular premise on the site that talk about advertising the public hearing date. If you are not familiar with the process, I just kind of want to mention that, bring it in.
So I thank you for the explanation. That seems like a big process. So we've
It
put
is.
in here that we don't want signs that show that it's a short-term rental, but then if we go through conditional use, we got to stake a sign in the yard to say, hey, this is short-term rental up for debate, come and talk at City Hall. I would particularly feel a little awkward giving some permission to break the code if we put these things in writing. Okay, so, and then we come to the big heavy hitter, the owner occupancy requirement. Through the process, we had the council work session. The council expressed wanting to license, tax, and inspect. Then it went through planning commission, a meeting I missed. That was in February. I listened back, and I believe a couple commissioners mentioned favoring an owner occupancy requirement. And that was all under the basic idea of limiting, of how do we keep this from growing into this, unsustainable situation where every other house on a block has become an Airbnb. And I just don't see the owner occupancy being the right way to limit that. We have currently 15, by my count, operating in North Kansas City. And if we pass that, other than Mark's and I believe one other one, the rest would be wiped off the map as it's written without the unless the other 13 go through conditional use and are, again, I'm not sure how we give approval beyond what would be written in the code. So I'm seeing the owner occupancy. I understand the intent, but it would essentially eliminate most of the rentals. Similarly to how when we overlaid owner occupancy on accessory dwelling units, nobody's building them. It's another layer that people are just not willing to deal with. So it would be my opinion that if we want to find a way to limit, whether it's throwing an overall number, which I think it's very messy, we find another route. Personally, I think the market limits it. At a certain point, homes become too expensive. The cash flow is not there. Rates are high right now. I dare somebody right now to find a property you can buy on the open market that will cash flow even as a short-term rental. It's not there right now. I've looked into it 9 or 10 different ways. So I say that to say I'm happy to discuss the rest of this, but later I would like to make a motion to strike the owner occupancy requirement.
I have a question about the owner occupancy requirement. How many days a year must an owner occupy a property for that to be considered owner occupied?
Excuse me. So the owner occupied requirement, we check with the Clay County records. We just see who is registered as ownership over there. We don't track how many days they have to stay on it or sleep overnight. There's no way you can track it.
I don't understand that. Does that mean that if our friends from Waldo are listed as the owner, they are considered occupying those properties?
No, it's your primary residence.
Okay, thank you. Oh, go ahead. I was going to say, if we're looking for ways to kind of get around or like mitigate the owner occupancy issue, is one possible solution getting approval from the neighbors of these units? That, I mean, if they're so non-problematic and so beneficial and good in the community, then wouldn't the neighbors be accepting of these units and approve them being Airbnbs?
Well, I mean, I understand that, the thought line there. Neighbors can say no for any given reason. And as soon as, you ask however many neighbors to the property, you're going to get a no from somebody. It's almost a guarantee. For any particular reason, that would be a really tough barrier.
Mayor DeLong?
No, I'm still trying to figure out the owner occupancy, exactly how you define that there. So if you pull up the Clay County Recorder site or their whatever property tax site, collector site, and it's owned by an LLC, for example, then you would determine that is not owner occupied.
That's correct. If you're owned by.
But if
LLC.
it is an individually named person, then you would assume
No.
that's owner occupied.
We check with your primary residency. So say if I own a property with Clay County registered with my name, and I have my utility bills or my other methods of approving my primary residency. So I bring those to confirm, okay, I'm the owner and this is my residency. This is my primary residency.
Okay.
But that,
To,
I'm confused.
to follow up on that, then I would say, if this continues with this in here, then I would say then we need to further define exactly what that means.
Well, I
Because
think
I think that's still,
We can define what does the owner occupancy.
now if it gets
mean.
stripped, it's indifferent. But if it's in there, then that needs to be, I would say,
Right.
further clarified. Because I do think that's confusing too.
We can
Most everybody.
add a definition to the code if it stays there to defining what is this requirement. This is, Kansas City, Missouri, according to our study and research among, they do have this as one of the tiers for their requirement. And they also has another tier that requires neighbors' consent. And so if I may comment on that real quick, the first thing I want to say is when you do ask and require for neighbor consent, it's not always you can't get it. However, there is a chance because what they developed is they developed something in between. Say if you are non-owner occupied, you need to get 55% or more direct neighbors' consent or approval on this. Otherwise, you go to conditional use permit. So they kind of developed two routes. But what we often find out is the city got stuck in the middle because your neighbor might not be residing, this might not be their primary residence. You have to track the ownership down and get their response to sign off. And during the process, also, you're wondering if you're applying for a conditional use permit, and then you're just prolonging the process intentionally down the road, and the city, especially if you are already running in a short-term rental, in this case, the city is getting stuck in the middle of, are we enforcing it? Are we forcing you to go this route? Or are we going to allow you some time? And how much time are we going to allow you to gathering these signatures? So I would just be cautious with this particular practice. Yes, Councilmember Smith? Sorry. Commissioner Smith.
Councilmember Smith.
So the idea of looking up the owner on the tax record, like I don't even hold my primary residence in my own name. It's in a trust. So like if we looked at that, it seems very convoluted to figure out if it is indeed somebody, unless you ask them point blank during the application process, is your primary residence, and trust that they're going to tell you the truth, which if they do, they get told no. So it would be tricky to enforce as an owner. I'm sure there's a way to do it. But I see, again, I see taking it out being the best way to go forward.
Councilmember Shekels? I'm sorry, Commissioner Shekels?
Okay. I have a few different notes. I want to say thank you, everybody, for your comments. As a resident, I understand resident concerns. As a traveler, I love to stay in Airbnbs. And if I'm going to another city, this is the exact kind of place I'd want to stay for a vacation. So I see both sides of it. I do lean more in favor of potentially removing the owner occupancy requirement, but I personally think that we need a limit. I don't think it's a good idea to just rely on, as Commissioner Smith said, the market to regulate how many are going to come. We need to set that, in my opinion. I think if we are going to put owners through two different licensing, I think we have a little bit of control there as to, I guess one of my questions is, how do we know what the application will be like when where will we be able to see what their application language will be? Like, what will they need to provide? What are we wanting to know? What is that going to look like? Not just the business license, but the short-term rental application.
We have not developed the registration form yet, but here's a language in the code, and you typically don't cover the details of a registration form because they can be changed up, updated throughout the time, and they're usually related to our standard operating. So there is the language that talking about registration form is item number 6, is talking about that the community development director shall approve and have the authority to establish application forms and submit requirements in compliance with this ordinance. So particularly what will be in the registration form will be questions probably like to accommodating these regulations, where your Airbnb is going to be operating. Are you operating off a bedroom? Are you operating the entity, the entirety of this property? And then question of how many guests you're hosting, because there's a building code requirement. So it's not like you can host 100 people anytime you want. And then details like, do you provide parking? I know parking is not a requirement here, but we probably will ask the question and just gathering more information. Of course, the applicants, their identity and address and things like that. And also insurance, things like that, we'll probably request as well. Again, we don't have the form ready yet. Usually after an ordinance being passed, like a subject like this, we typically will give the department a couple weeks to develop those forms and a couple weeks to make sure these forms, because it's not going to just be reviewed by community development. It's also going to be reviewed by fire department, because they're the ones involved in inspection for building and fire code along with community development. And also we're going to probably notify police department and look at public works, just make sure they're all understanding, okay, this is where the short-term rental property is, and just for any foreseeable issues coming down the road. So the forms won't be ready for a while till the ordinance is passed. And also, even after we provide the form for registration and when we officially establish this process, we're not going to bring the enforcement down right away. So there is always a grace period when a new code is, kicked in. And the grace period, part of it is we're going to inform and educate existing, business owners or residents who's operating it, and find this particular opportunity for them to go from non-compliance to in compliance with the code, and then we'll help them as much as we possibly could do. And then we will bring down the enforcement. Usually that's months later.
Thank you. And I think a lot of the things that I had made note of, we have already been discussed. I think, if I remember from our February meeting, I think one of the concerns with having, or the reason that some of the people were leaning more towards owner-occupied was knowing who owns it. Where are they local? Is it an LLC out of state? I don't know if there is a way to come to a compromise where we're not getting a bunch of out-of-state investors or out-of-town investors that are buying our properties just to make them short-term rentals, but that they are people like the people that spoke here that live here that own, not multiple, Airbnbs, short-term rentals all across the country, but are just using it as a way to supplement their own personal income to a degree. So I don't know if there's any way, that would maybe be my thought as well, to find some way to differentiate between the two or regulate that aspect of it.
So, Commissioner Shako, and to be honest with you, I think this is an experimental subject because due to the research we're seeing now, we have averaged 15 to 20 short-term rentals in the city And again, I'm not monitoring every day, but this is how my experience is. So we have not seen this become an issue, a big issue yet for code compliance. My suggestion for you today is if you're not sure how do you want to regulate this today, the answer might be not regulating it till we foresee the pattern coming with more issues. Then we know we can keep in mind we can always come back and amend it, and likely this piece will be amended in a year when we learn a little bit more. However, the purpose for this piece to be in the code is that first we want to allow short-term rental officially. And this is what I've been keep emphasizing right now. It is illegal and we want to make it legal, and it seems like this is what everybody agrees. Then we want to have regulations about it. And so let's don't forget about what our initial thoughts are for it. We want to make it legal. And then the second opinion is we want to have regulations because we don't want things go out of control. We don't want to say, we allow short-term rental, that's it. Go have as much parties as you want. We want to have regulations here. So the question at the end of the day is, are these regulations too much, too strict, or are these too loose? We don't know yet because we don't have enough data that's backing up our story yet. I would put it this way. However, throughout this particular process that we established today, today meaning in our current time, maybe we will learn a little bit more of what we should really regulate. And I do see this as a moving target down the road, and we will work on this piece again probably. If that kind of gives you guys a little bit peace of mind.
Who gonna go next year? Okay.
Go for it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I actually had the same ideas. Could there be, and maybe it's not now, maybe it's down the road, a compromise where I heard a couple stories tonight. They live in town, like they're North Kansas City residents. That, as a neighbor, that makes you feel a little bit better. You probably have their number. You could go knock on their door in the middle of the night and say, hey, we got a problem. You need to come solve it. Something like that. I'd like to at least consider that if that's the compromise between no owner occupancy and what we have now. My take on this is, yeah, we do have a challenging balance here. I think it's been brought up. I heard earlier the comment about, we do need to bring people to stay here because that supports businesses, and that is in the master plan. But also in the master plan, as I was reading here on number 3, the application is conformance with the master plan vision theme 2, increase the supply of townhomes, lifestyle, multifamily options, and centers of activity around the corridors. When we want residents here and we have a competing interest for the home that they want to live in, to raise their kids in, I've talked to several families that are interested in moving here. They want to get their kids here. They want to come play at the parks. They want to do that. But the market won't allow it right now. And there's a lot of forces affecting that. But when I agree, I went and talked to just several residents this week around on the city streets around where I live on 29th. And their biggest concern is actually not the quality of the tenants there, whoever, but the number one concern is it's pushing up the prices even higher because our supply is so limited. So I got to thinking about that, and I thought they want to see some way to hopefully, again, most people don't want them completely ruled out, but keep it from getting out of hand. So since when I listened to the previous commission comments, I think you said the city council doesn't want to cap it. They have no appetite for that. So that we've got a problem here if we can't come up with the language that's going to hold it in check, and the city isn't willing, city council isn't willing to put a hard cap on it because it's not enforceable or manageable, then we'll have to try to find some way to compromise it. I do feel the one thing that is, as I was thinking about it a lot this week, and I've stayed in Airbnbs on vacations, if one's not available, we'll use a hotel. We do have hotels in town. There's not a problem that there aren't short-term rentals available. We have some great businesses in town, so that have hotels. So we've built some new ones. So we've got hotels as an option. So that is one thing to consider. The other thing to consider is that North Kansas City is a bit unique. We're landlocked here. We're very high density by most Airbnbs I've stayed at have been a little further spread apart. And I think that's just where the application makes more sense. If you're in a cabin in the woods, if you're in a resort destination like Branson or the beach, I feel like getting a high number of Airbnbs is fine, but there's a feeling that we need to keep it very manageable in the city. I'll just kind of end maybe with one other story. I talked to a homeowner. He lives in the same complex where there's an Airbnb, the same row of townhomes. He's been here over 10 years, and he's at the point he's ready to move because of the Airbnb. He just doesn't like that feeling of not knowing who his neighbor is and the number of people. It's almost always booked in his view, different cars every night. It's just very unsettling to him. He travels for work. He wants to be in an established place where he knows people when he comes home when he's not working, and not feel like people are rotating in and out at that level. So that's kind of where I land on it. I think we do have to find some attempt to manage the number if we're not going to be allowed to set a hard cap. I do want to bring up one other point I thought was a little strange. The tax rate we set to the local hotel rate, right? Is that 5%? Is that what it is?
I believe so, but I'll have to double check.
I was surprised by that. Kansas City just passed 7.5%, correct?
They're a charter
Okay.
city.
So, yeah, I thought, staying in Airbnb is a privilege. I could see us having maybe a higher tax than the hotel tax, just to maybe encourage that, again, we're trying to find ways to keep this from growing. Sometimes taxation is a way to encourage the behaviors you want. So I'm not saying like a crazy number, but it might make sense to at least match our neighbors, because if we don't, and someone's going to build a new Airbnb and they see, well, North Kansas City is lower than KC Mo, it could be a challenge where we're getting more inflow because it's cheaper here. We should just keep that in mind. That's all I had.
Thanks, you. So this is an entitlement with a term of 365 days. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
Is that entitlement transferable in the event of a sale?
Oh, you mean if the ownership changes? No, it's not.
No? Okay.
Because we hold on to the business license and at current language, there is an owner occupied requirement over there, so.
Sure. Okay. Understood. The other question that I had was regarding point B2, the owner occupancy requirement. The second part of that sentence is must demonstrate a sufficient ability for site maintenance and property management. I think one could argue that a non-resident owner could demonstrate sufficient capability for site maintenance and property management. Surely we require long-term owners or long-term renters to demonstrate that ability. Can you describe what that process looks like, or what we envision this one looking like?
So this is a language put in there for the code enforcement.
Okay.
So my department has a component for property maintenance that we check routinely. We have systematic inspection, actually, to make sure the properties are maintained the way they should be, and we receive complaints as well, and then we go out and investigate. So this language particular here, regardless if it's owner occupied or not, I would recommend to keep the language of whoever the applicant is granted with disapproval, they shall demonstrate a sufficient ability for site maintenance and property management, meaning we will check the evidence that they have, providing their phone numbers, and this phone number needs to be, valid, and we can get hold of them, be able to get the contact in time, and then we will operate this throughout the time. And when we go through a code compliance, meaning, say if there is a problem with a property, then my staff will contact this phone number, and we find, okay, this phone number is not valid. Of course, we're going to notify them as well through letters, and if we cannot get hold of them at all, they're not providing sufficient capability of maintaining this property, then therefore there's a base for us to say you don't comply with this regulation, then we can move forward with a code compliance component, either suspend or revoke your license or your registration.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me like that's an important, maybe the most important of B2, or the most important aspect of B2. is the sufficient ability for site maintenance and property management. I'm not hearing a whole lot of appetite or reading in the feedback a whole lot of appetite for the owner occupancy requirement. I understand that the reason why we've chosen to do that, why that's in there today. But it seems like, especially to the extent that this is a liquid policy, something that's going to change over time as the city learns a little bit more about what we're capable of handling and what we want to accomplish, that maybe that's not something that we ought to do today rather than later when we have a better idea of what it all looks like.
Yes, Mayor.
I would like to just make a couple of comments. I really want to thank everybody for making comments today. I have been a resident of North Kansas City for many years. I too graduated from North Kansas City High School in the 90s and grew up a mile away from here. So I also understand why you feel the love of this place. I also grew up in a time when there were no Airbnbs in North Kansas City. So they changed the complexity of the complexion of the city. There's a lot of things that change the complexion of the city, but I recognize that you're trying to run a business and you're trying to supplement your income. I also recognize the importance of community building and of knowing your neighbors, and that is the one thing that I love about this place is how I know my neighbors. I would like, if we do remove an owner occupancy requirement for this amendment, we either need to require that the owners of the property be North Kansas City residents, or we set a hard low limit for how many Airbnbs we allow in our community. And I also ask that we prohibit short-term rentals in multi-unit buildings like townhouses, and duplexes. You all live in the duplex that is adjacent, so you understand what it is to be a good neighbor and what it is to be kind and quiet and considerate. Somebody who is renting out the property that Commissioner Spencer talked about, the people who live next door to that don't have any recourse if the Airbnb tenants are unruly or loud. They can't just shut it down like you all can. You can go next door and kick them out because you rented it to them. So as somebody who lives in a townhouse, I would not want an Airbnb next door sharing a wall with me, potentially misusing a barbecue grill on the deck and burning down my whole unit. That legitimately terrifies me. So I know we need to strike a balance between whether or not we allow unfettered use and letting the market decide, and restricting it so much that we don't allow for any of it. But I think we need to be more cautious than not, and I think we need to try to find a compromise that respects the community members that live here in our community in any way possible.
Okay. So when it was talked about in February, there was a discussion that there was no appetite at the council level to cap it, and that is true, to put a hard cap on it because of the messiness of who gets that last permit. What happens if somebody falls off or like moves away and now there's a new one in the pool? Does everybody just show up and bang down the door of City Hall until they get in and get the permit? Hard caps are very difficult. I really like what you said, Commissioner Spencer, about using tax as an incentive or disincentive, at least leveling the playing field with our neighbor. That can be one way. I think we can explore ways to limit it without capping it and without making it so restricted with owner occupancy that it essentially stops things from operating right now. Kind of like what you said is if we remove the owner occupancy now, I think item 13 gives us the right to come back in and at any point make changes, or I think that's how it's written, and that we continue to have this discussion about how do we sensibly strike that balance and keep the community active. Shu, this is a question for you. If we want to, so I've given you some feedback on the food stuff and all that. Do we need motions on all these changes or
Yes.
proposed changes?
You'll need motions on all the changes.
Everything.
Megan would appreciate all of that.
Goodness, okay.
I think Mayor has a question too.
Yeah,
before
I mean, I would always note that it doesn't have to be necessarily resolved tonight either. This can't always, you can't always move to continue this case
You
as
can
well.
move to continue
And we
this.
continue to have more time to flush these things out.
Would that allow?
So that they could aggregate some of this feedback, maybe bring it out back again, do kind of another round of what we did tonight. But I would continue with another one that I would consider adding, certainly as we talk about affordability as well. I've generally been against seeing them added in incentivized properties. So if you get a tax incentive from the city, then that probably should not have short-term rentals as well. We could probably add that in development agreements, but it might just be more solidified if we add it.
I would
I'm thinking here.
not recommend you add that to this language rather than going to the development agreement with those. Because the reason I'm saying that is, first, you're going to maintain a record. The projects that's all incentivized, right?
Yeah.
And each incentive is a little bit different of its dynamic. We don't want to just to have a broad cap over there for this reason. And another reason I'm saying that is all those tax abatement, it has its sunset time. And so it is a little
Yeah.
tricky to figure out when it sunsets. And however, when your short-term rental is not up to renewal, and what do you do in this gap?
Yeah, I mean, we have all those. I'd still stand by saying that, that is something I've been passionate about in the past, and I know it's generally not
Right.
something that the city is wanted to support. Okay. But, no, I would still stand by considering adding that in this as well. I'm going to ask on inspections. I don't see anything about inspections in here.
It will be under the form that's being established by Community Development Director and all the required supplementals.
So those would
On the
those
form.
refer back to basically what our existing inspection is for
Yes, for
long-term
rental
rentals? Okay.
property. No, they're not going to be exactly the same as long rentals because the merits and the nature of a lodging short-term rental in the building code, there is a definition of lodging. And,
So-
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I'd follow up, and that might be a good one to bring back and maybe even clarify in the policy as well, just so we all are on the same page on what that is. Another random thing I would note here on long-term rentals, they do require a local agent or representative authorized by the owner to handle the affairs of the property. The local agent is a person who resides within 50 miles of the city limits, and maybe one of the owners, the local representative is not an owner, then the owner shall provide proof that the local representative is authorized to act on the owner's behalf, which may be language we can carry over to short-term rentals as well if the desire is to, and it sounds like it is, to remove the owner occupancy requirement. So I would recommend carrying similar language over for this as well. On the taxation, do we know for a fact that sales tax is not being remitted to the Department of Revenue?
I know.
And then
for a
farther
fact.
remitted to the city?
I know, in fact, right now, we don't have, it's illegal right now for all short-term rental.
But they,
And we don't get a check.
and I'm speaking on something I don't follow.
Yeah.
When you do pull one up and you kind of walk through the process without doing it, it does show you North Cranston, Kansas City sales tax that generally appears to be 2%, which is what our sales tax rate is. So I know we're not getting the 5, but I'm still curious if the 2 is being remitted somewhere because it appears as though it's being collected.
I can double check with our.
You see what I'm saying? Because I think right now it's showing us a sales tax. So we do have a 2% sales tax, but they are not collecting the 5% hotel motel tax.
Okay, I have to apologize. That's not my specialty.
Yeah, no, I know.
And
That's a good finance question for the finance
That's a
department.
finance question. I'm almost certain we are not collecting it, or we have not being reimbursed with it.
Okay, yeah.
However, I can double check and get the answer back in our
Okay,
next meeting.
perfect. And then, yeah, I would definitely support the 5% tax. I don't know if I'd support going over, because, as I talked to hotel owners about this issue, one of their things is kind of a business parity argument a little bit, and saying, they're either being charged as 2% or 0, kind of depending on where it is. We just think, let's level the playing field a little bit. I mean, we are in this kind of lodging industry of sorts, and I know what they want to see is basically what I call business fairness to their view, which is same taxation, similar regulations. Okay, and then we may consider, and this will be up to the Planning Commission, if we go the continuance route, perhaps reopening a more in-depth survey that gets more direct answers with details that the Planning Commission may be looking for further guidance. And I have other random musings, but I'll hold that for now. I've written on 3 sheets of paper now, so I'm all over the place here on thought.
Yeah, I would like to clarify one of the items you mentioned is the inspection component. So the inspection component will be developed along with the registration form, meaning we're not going to specify exactly where we're inspecting, but we will have on staff, we'll have an inspection as a component to the registration form before we approve it. So we will have our staff go out, and our staff, meaning our building code official, along with fire marshal, to inspect the particular short-term rental residence and make sure that it is in compliance with the building and fire code.
Okay. Thank you. And further, I would just think a lot of people ask generally what my feeling is on this subject. I would say it mostly aligns with what you kind of saw in the community survey there, which I think indicated a willingness to allow short-term rentals with some feeling of limitation and definitely regulation, but I think we're getting to that point. So there's kind of the high level where I stand now. What that limit and what that cap, or how you do something like that, that is probably for much further discussion. But I'm free all night, so.
So, kind of gathering everything together, there's been a lot of feedback given to you. I believe you've been taking notes on all that stuff. If we continue it, would it be where you consolidate that into a new zoning amendment, like a new red line version that we would get to review?
That's correct. It will be a new red light version.
Okay. The only one that seems we haven't, like, I've seen heads nod and shake, and like the owner occupancy piece, do we need a thumbs up, thumbs down to give you that feedback to bring back to us?
Let me ask you this question then, because I believe Mayor DeLong has mentioned about carrying over the requirement of an owner or owner representatives as the language we defined in our long-term rental ordinance to carry over to this requirement. I kind of see all you kind of somehow nod your head. I know.
That's the landlord registration piece, right? Where we have to submit a form that has the contact info for a local agent within 50 miles.
Yes. Yes, that is part of the registration process, and that's the last piece on that. It is number 7 at the bottom is, so yeah, that's.
We can bring that language to this code, just clarify that. It doesn't have to be on the registration form, because I bear the pressure to develop and establish the registration form. You don't need to approve the registration form, and theoretically, that requirement should not be on the registration form if it's not in this code. So I would like this language to be in the code if this is the route you guys want to take. And I do remember our chair has mentioned about your thoughts about this owner requirement in community, and we also heard some comments on it. So if you guys can give some thumbs up and thumbs down, I think that would be very helpful to me. I'm not saying you have to take a vote on whether or not we're moving this way, but I would really appreciate it. And again, next time when I bring a new red line version to you, you can have more comments, Siva. Yes, Mayor.
Okay.
You're giving 2 fingers. What does that mean?
Oh, well, yeah. Sorry if I was throwing something up there. No, and I may even feel different on owner occupancy depending on residential zoning as well. So I do feel different about the single-family housing areas versus what Mr. I can't remember, Brock brought up earlier in having something that's possibly zoned as already mixed density or multifamily residential, which should be close to that region of R3 or higher, or the duplex case of R2 or higher, which by design are kind of set up for that sort of thing anyways. So I may feel different on, that's just something the Planning Commission could explore as well, is different requirements based on zoning. that's more of just an open-ended statement.
So just to clarify what Mayor DeLong's talking about, he's talking about bringing, my apology, he's talking about bringing regulations of owner occupied or not
Also have
based off
them
the
printed
zoning
if anyone
district.
wants to fight over what a map looks like.
So for all those people who are watching online through the YouTube streaming, I have pulled up our rezoning map over here. So generally, residential zones, they're represented with the beige to brownish color. So you'll see the lighter the beige or yellow color is, the lower the density is.
Are you
So-
able to open the legend on that as well so it displays at the same time?
Yes,
Or?
we can. So this
Maybe.
will probably give you an idea of what these are.
Oh,
Give me 1 second.
okay.
So as you can see, with the very light beige color, it stands for R1A. So this is a traditional suburban style single-family house zoning district, whereas R1B is a higher density, it's more of a compact one single-family residential district. And whereas R2, R3, R4, R5, that's just adding more density and requirement and the maximum allowable units over to the residential zoning district. So one thing I would like you guys to keep in mind is that we do have several legal non-conforming units, meaning they don't comply with today's code, but they existed before and continue being used that way before the new zoning code was adopted. And they're not single-family houses. They could be multi-unit houses or multi-unit apartments that's located in R1A and R1B. So that I just want to bring that to your attention when you're considering zoning district. But this is also a common practice that you restrict the ownership for a certain type of zoning district. For Kansas City, they prohibit short-term rental in certain single-family residential district. So it's not, something will be so odd to do. But like Mayor DeLong said, this is something you could consider as well.
Just to make things more complex.
Yeah.
There.
That's okay. My office knows how to read a zoning map. It's fine.
Yours does very much better than I do.
So, sorry.
Oh.
So to get forward on this, can we, for the next version that we review, if we go thumbs up, thumbs down, like remove owner occupancy and replace it with the agent within 50 miles language that is from the residential or the long-term rental piece? Would that be
Can you define or elaborate on like what an agent would be and it not be the owner of the property?
Yeah, so a lot of people that run short-term rentals will contract with an agency that manages it for them. So the agency would be a local group, or it would be required to be a local group per this piece that would manage the property. They would be the point of contact, not the owner themselves. But it would be a local person or agency that would run and manage the property. So if there was a problem, there was something, people being unruly, a maintenance issue, they are the person to call. Same as with a property manager that a long-term rental would have. So like when I register my rentals with the city, if I had a property manager, I would list that out. I don't because I'm a glutton for punishment, but separate issue.
Could we take that to just owner? Why wouldn't we just do owner within 50 miles? I think that's closer to the original intent, because owner agent then starts to get a little funny where somebody who doesn't care at all has paid someone who does live in the area to try to be the person on the paper.
I mean, I'm open to that.
That would get my thumbs up. An owner within an area, not a owner agent.
So just to understand the language you guys are proposing here, you're proposing changing the owner occupancy requirement to that the owner primary residency shall be within 50 miles of the short-term rental property. Am I understanding correctly?
That's where we've landed or drifted to. It still begs the question, how are we defining primary residence? How are we checking on all of these things? And then are we drawing circles? Is it as the crow flies? Is it by road? Like, how are we defining 50 miles? So it opens up other questions, but I think that's, we're headed in the right direction.
Well, those same questions are there for the current.
Yep.
We're just changing it from agent to owner.
Yep.
So I think that speaks to the spirit of starting with something. If the market, if we're just still seeing way too many, in some point in the near future, year, whatever, then we look at revisiting again. Again, we're trying to find balance where they don't grow on their own without any control mechanisms, right?
Yep. And, sorry, one more. To go back to, I understand the parity argument with the hotels in town. I don't think they would object to us going higher on the tax. And I, like what you said, if we're at 5% and Kansas City, Missouri's at 7.5%, it brings more interest here by default. So I see putting that 7.5 overlay, that will be collected and remitted through the platform that, it should be collected and remitted. Yes, sir.
Thank you. That would require a vote of the people. Again, you would have to take that to the ballot because it would be a tax increase. And I'm going to say this was like 45% confidence. I believe that third-class cities may be capped out at 5% on the hotel motel transient tax anyways. As a matter of fact, not just a vote of the people. Council can't authorize that. It would take a vote of the State House and State Senate first to allow the city to pass that.
Let's not do any of that then. I like the intent.
So
stick with 5%.
There's death by regulation.
Okay. There it goes.
They're having to deal with Missouri.
Okay. So
But I could be wrong. She can bring it back if I'm wrong.
on?
I have one more question. The current owner agent for long-term rentals, is that information public?
Yes.
It is public, okay. And because I think that's really kind of one of the big concerns is something's going on at a short-term rental, middle of the night, you want to be able to contact somebody to take care of it. So if the neighbors know, owners within 50 miles have a way to contact them, then I think we're, I opened more worms, I'm sorry.
Thank you. When you say open to the public, is that online?
No,
Is that something people can pull? Would I have to call your office and do a
I
sunshine request?
Yes, I misunderstood your question. I thought if you're asking if that long-term rental requirement is open to a public. I said, yes, that is an open requirement.
Sure,
So-
yeah.
My bad.
So I guess a follow-on to that is, let's go through the assumption of kind of the direction he's going here. You do have an issue, and we keep using odd hours tonight, so I'll stick with it. 3 a.m., I don't know. Who would a resident call under kind of the proposal now?
They'll call the police.
Just call the police.
If there is a problem, yes. So the owner's information will be required in the license that they will put on display in the conspicuous place for their clients. So if their clients have any issue, they can get somebody held accountable for that. For neighbors who's having issue, most likely it's noise or issues like that, or activities, they will call the police.
Got it, okay. I'll save the rest for next meeting.
I just, are we going to do the thumbs up, or is it borne itself out with the conversation that we want to go to the 50-mile thing?
Yeah, I think that will be very helpful for me to see what you guys think.
So it sounds at this point that we're ready to see if there's a motion to continue this. Do we need to make a motion to continue this?
Yes, you will need to make a
I'd
motion.
move to continue.
Is there a second?
I would clarify the motion and ask when we're continuing it to. Or ask for clarity, I guess, on the motion. I'm not going to clarify it next meeting.
Yeah, next meeting. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, continue to the next meeting.
Yeah, we will need a continuance date. Continue to the next meeting, which will be
May the Cinco de Mayo?
Is it?
May the 4th.
May the 4th be with you. All right.
We might have to alter that.
Religious holiday.
Yeah.
I'm going to call the roll.
To all who celebrate.
Every day's a holiday around North Kansas City. Come on.
Commissioner Steele. So this is calling the roll for.
Motion second, and that is on continuance, correct?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Commissioner McGrone,
Yes.
Mayor DeLong.
Yes.
Commissioner Shekels,
Yes.
Commissioner Spencer.
Yes.
It's still
It passes.
Oh, we got another item. Ugh, I got excited for a second.
Okay. 1 second, let me get back to my notes. The next item is PC 2023-04-04, a zoning text amendment related to marijuana.
All right, this item in front of you, I anticipate has no issues at all, but if you have questions, I'm open to it. We're simply going to strike medical out of the marijuana requirement, like I mentioned before, because the state allowed and has passed the ballot approval for allowing recreational marijuana. So as our zoning code being adjusted, we just want to include both medical and recreational marijuana into our code enforcement.
I now open the public hearing on PC 2023-04-04. If anyone wishes to speak, please approach the microphone.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion on PC 2023-04-04?
I recommend the approval of the proposed amendments as presented by staff.
Second. Second.
I move to recommend. There we go.
And we need a roll call.
Commissioner Steele,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner McGrone,
Yes.
Mayor DeLong,
Yes.
Commissioner Shekels,
Yes.
Commissioner Spencer.
Yes.
Passes.
Are there any comments from the staff tonight?
Yeah, I would like to introduce Jasmine Bustos to you all. I saved this for the last because I don't want people wait there. Jasmine is a senior in UMKC study urban planning and design, and she will be graduating here in May very soon. She is my new intern in community development. I just would like you to welcome her as much as I do.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Right. Last item. Thank you all for your hard work tonight. We've heard a lot of good pieces, and this is the purpose of public engagement. And if you or any resident that you heard has more issues or questions or concerns, please feel free to put your comment into our website. It's still open. We just have a cut of this at 5 o'clock today so we can deliver the results to you. But the comment place is still open. And I'll bring the amended draft for the short-term rental to you in May. And we'll see you all in May.
Excellent. Are there any comments from commissioners?
Quick one on that thought for the next meeting. Will there still be another public hearing as part of the short term? So if someone didn't get a chance to speak tonight and wanted to come, they
That's
could
correct.
come next month, right?
Yes,
Okay.
there will be a public hearing.
I would also like to say that I enjoyed the spirited discussion. I don't ever like disagreeing with my friends and colleagues and neighbors up here, but I appreciate everyone's passion and devotion to this and the homework you've all done.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Aye.
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 Aye.